Tammy Marquardt, wrongfully convicted. Tammy Marquardt was a 21-year-old when her life changed forever. 2 years prior, she had a son that she named Kenneth, who suffered from many serious health issues. On October 9, 1993, her 2.5-year-old son got tangled in the sheets, gasping for air. She tried to free him, but was unsuccessful. After calling 911 and failing to perform CPR properly, emergency crews came and took Kenneth to the hospital, where he was revived but suffered severe brain damage. As Kenneth was taken to the hospital, Tammy was brought to the police station for interrogation. 3 days later, Kenneth was taken off life support and his viable organs were donated. Dr. Shemy did not believe the death was due to Kenneth's past medical history and became suspicious of Tammy. He decided to call in the suspected child abuse and neglect program. Later that same year, Dr. Charles Smith claimed the death was not accidental, and the blame quickly fell on the distressed mother. She was offered a plea bargain by the Crown for manslaughter and a lesser sentence, but Tammy refused. In court, Dr. Smith testified that the death was due to asphyxia, as a result of being smothered or strangled. The prosecution developed a story where Tammy had killed her infant in a moment of frustration. The Crown further relied on several children's aid workers to lend circumstantial support to Dr. Smith's conclusion that the death was non-accidental. Tammy maintained her innocence, and her defense argued that Kenneth had died during an epileptic seizure, but called no expert of their own to support this theory. Tammy was charged with second-degree murder against her child. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility for parole for 10 years. Tammy appealed her conviction to the Ontario Court of Appeal, but was dismissed. Legal Aid Ontario refused to provide her with further funding, so she was unable to apply for an appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada. Her time in prison was rough. Not only was she eventually found out to be a baby killer, but she was also pregnant. Once news got out about her charges, she was attacked by many women as guards looked the other way. In 1996, she gave birth to another son. But Tammy did not murder her child. In fact, no one did. According to Innocence Canada, wrongful conviction is when a person is factually innocent but pleads guilty to or is tried for a crime they did not commit and is found to be guilty. Some factors that affect wrongful conviction are public pressure for a conviction, tunnel vision, an unpopular defendant, poor witness identification, poor representation by defense lawyer, falsified forensic evidence, among others. These factors affect the accused before, during, and after the trial for the offense they are being accused of committing. There were many factors that led to Tammy's wrongful conviction. These include issues of gender, age, class, and mental illness that cause marginalization, tunnel vision, police interrogation tactics, expert witness, circumstantial evidence, suppressed evidence, eyewitness testimony, and inadequacy of defense. These factors can be seen pre-trial, during the trial, and post-trial. Marginalization. Tammy was a young mother with limited financial resources and parenting and coping skills, who was involved in an unstable relationship with Kenneth's stepfather. She was seen as a bad mother. She got pregnant in high school and dropped out. This lifestyle was used to prove that she murdered her son. Tammy was not the typical perfect mother. With financial struggles, experiences of unstable abusive relationships, and drug problems. She was unable to appeal again due to lack of funding due to her low class. Against Canadian legal rights of presumption of innocence, she was targeted right away by the police, doctors, and prosecution. Tunnel vision. Because of her marginalization, police and others who dealt with her had her locked as the perpetrator. Once suspicion arose about the possibility of an unnatural death, suspicions surrounded Tammy. The police, doctors, and prosecutors all locked in on a homicide and saw Tammy as the only possible offender. Police interrogation tactics. Tammy was brought to the police station for interrogation immediately after her son was taken to the hospital. She was in a state of distress, and her demeanor was presented as evidence in court. Expert witness. Dr. Charles Smith determined the cause of death was asphyxiation due to suffocation or strangulation. He did not have proper qualifications and did not consider natural causes of death that are reflected in Kenneth's previous health issues. Circumstantial evidence. Dr. Smith declared the particular hemorrhages found on the organs and tissues were due to asphyxiation, although this could not be fully determined by the doctor, yet was claimed as fact. All evidence given was circumstantial, and no facts were presented, yet she was still convicted. Eyewitness testimony. Nurses and doctors gave very different descriptions of Tammy's demeanor at the hospital, and some testimonies even contradicted their own notes. Testimonies from social workers involved information that they had misinterpreted from when she had told them about being worried about hurting her child in the past. After Kenneth had passed away, Tammy attempted to throw herself in front of oncoming traffic on a night out with her husband and friends. She cried about her guilt about being unable to save him and perform CPR, and claimed she had killed Kenneth. 2 witnesses from that night testified and claimed she admitted to killing Kenneth. Suppressed evidence. The fact that she was pressured to donate organs may have led to suppressed evidence because it could not be examined to prove if it was an accidental death. Inadequacy of defense. The jury was not properly screened for bias, which is against legal rights. The defense also did not call their own expert witness to back their claims that Kenneth had died from natural causes. In 1991, concerns began to arise regarding Dr. Smith's competence. In 2003, the Association in Defense of the Wrongfully Convicted began to pursue Dr. Smith as a disreputable expert. In 2004, Tammy applied to AIDWIC. A year later, AIDWIC wrote to the Chief Coroner for Ontario and the Attorney General urging for a public inquiry into Dr. Charles Smith's work. As part of the Gouge inquiry, Dr. Pekka Saukko was assigned to review Kenneth's death. In his report, he concluded that asphyxia was illogical and against scientific-based evidence because there was not enough evidence for the diagnosis to be made. In 2008, Dr. Simon Avis conducted a second review of the evidence for Kenneth's death and agreed that Smith had wrongfully attributed the death to asphyxia and concluded that Kenneth may have died during an epileptic seizure or other natural causes. On February 10, 2009, AIDWIC brought an application for leave to appeal Tammy's case to the Supreme Court of Canada. A month later, she was released from the Grand Valley Institution for Women, pending the decision for leave to appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada. On April 30, 2009, the Supreme Court of Canada returned the case to the Court of Appeal for Ontario so they could consider the new evidence and decide whether Tammy's conviction was a miscarriage of justice. On June 7, 2011, the Ontario Court of Appeal overruled her conviction and ordered a new trial to commence on February 10, 2012. Before a new trial could begin, the Crown withdrew the charges against her. Life after her conviction. Superior Court Justice Michael Brown offered an apology to the 38-year-old Marquardt, who spent more than 13 years in prison. She says she does not dwell on the mistakes Dr. Smith made, but realizes that without them, she would probably not have been wrongfully convicted. Her one son was immediately placed in foster care when she was convicted, and the son she gave birth to in prison was also immediately removed and placed into foster care. This caused her to face secondary victimization with the removal of her children. This case proves that major changes are needed to the criminal justice system to reduce and eliminate the likelihood of wrongful convictions. It is clear that there are systematic and social issues at play that need to be changed. The most prominent factor that went into Tammy's wrongful conviction was the results of Dr. Smith's autopsy, saying Kenneth was killed. Without these findings and his testimony, it is unlikely that Tammy would have been found guilty, as there was not much evidence against her. Dr. Smith was not a qualified pediatric forensic pathologist, but no one spoke up against him, so he became a leading expert in his field. He contributed to many other wrongful convictions by giving unreliable testimonies that were taken for fact. Although his license was revoked, changes need to be made so nothing like this happens again. Solutions that the Gouge Inquiry recommended were to increase accountability and transparency and enhance communication within the criminal justice system. Dr. Smith, as well as other participants in Tammy's trial, also relied too heavily on Tammy's background, which pinned her as a dangerous mother. Information about the family of the victim should not be relevant to the autopsy, and when it is available, it raises biases. Qualification and biases should be verified for the experts and anyone giving testimonies. Any biased information should not be included during the trial. Subjective opinions about behavior also should not be allowed during testimonies, especially when it comes to judging how people cope with stressful events. It is impossible to tell how someone is feeling based on a short interaction with them, and guilt cannot be derived from this. Doctors, nurses, police, and friends all gave their opinions on how Tammy seemed to react after the death, and it was used to prove her guilt. Subjective and circumstantial opinions such as these are not evidence. Funding is also an issue faced by certain individuals who are charged with crimes. Tammy was of lower class and could not afford to continuously pay for legal support. When she wanted to appeal her conviction to the Supreme Court of Canada, she was denied funding from Legal Aid Ontario, so she could not continue on her fight to prove she was innocent. Making funding easily accessible or having a different system in place may help free those wrongfully convicted sooner. It is also important to ensure everyone has access to adequate defense. If Tammy's defense team had brought an expert to testify that the death had been to natural causes, they could have risen doubt in the minds of the jury so that Tammy would not be convicted. Ensuring the defense is prepared and acting to their best ability is important. All evidence should be available to the defense before the trial as well. Tunnel vision is seen right from the beginning in cases such as these, where no other suspects are even brought up. Measures need to be put in place to reduce the effects of tunnel vision. It is essential that the police consider all suspects and do not focus all of their attention on one person. And during the trial, it is important to give all evidence to ensure the correct person is convicted. Steps such as these need to be taken to reduce the impact that wrongful convictions have and prevent what happened to Tammy from happening again.